December is my favorite month of the year. It's a month of celebration, of good cheer and tidings, and it's represented by my favorite person on the planet, Santa Claus. Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters and honored guests, I do believe in Santa, and I ask you, why not? But who is this mysterious man, and where did he come from, and what does he really represent in today's world? Mysterious, yes, probably because this guy has so many names that it keeps the mystery alive for certain. We know him as Santa Claus, we know him as Kris Kringle, St. Nicholas, St. Nick, sometimes just plain old Santa. Traditionally, it is said where he came from was actually way back in the 4th century. He was St. Nicholas. He was a bishop in the Greek Christian religion. He was orphaned very young as a child, and his parents were well-to-do, and he spent his entire life giving away his wealth and concentrating on the impoverished, particularly the children, the poor, and the downtrodden. He lived in a part of the world which today is known as Turkey. When he passed away, and it is also said that pirates actually raided his tomb, and right now the remains of St. Nicholas lie in a small coastal village in Italy. So where he came from and where he is today, it is still a mystery. But gosh, you know, he's been around for 18 centuries. That is amazing. So it depends on what corner of the world you live in, what you think of Santa Claus, what the traditions are, what you call him, and what the events are surrounding him. In America, we brought Santa over, obviously, when we came over as pilgrims, but our Americanized version of Santa Claus is actually a blending of Britain's Father Christmas and the Dutch Sinterklaas. And that's how we came up with our version of Santa Claus. But it wasn't until 1823 when there was a famous poem written by, I forget his name, Clement Clark Moore, and it was the night before Christmas. That was the first time that we as Americans started to realize who this guy really was. We recognized his superpowers, where he could put a finger up to the side of his nose and shoot up a chimney to a sleigh that was parked on the roof and hauled by flying reindeer. But we didn't actually get a visual of who Santa Claus was until several years later. I think it was about 1860. There was a famous illustrator back then called Thomas Nast, and he did a lot of work for Harper's Bazaar. He is the man who came up with our visual image of who Santa Claus is now, the big guy with the red suit and the white trim and the hat and all that. So, as I said, Santa Claus is different for everybody. For me, I'd like to share what he means. To me, Santa Claus is the best part of all of us. He embodies generosity, compassion, goodwill, cheer, and tidings to all. But most importantly, I think that he gives us that most prized possession of all, and that is joy. One point I heard, or someone told me, or I read it, and I can't remember the source, but joy was described to me as the feeling of smiling on the inside. So indulge me for a minute, everybody. Just close your eyes real briefly, and without changing your outside, smile on the inside. See how that feels, how it kind of heightens your energy just a little bit? To me, that is joy, and that's what Santa brings. And how I came to realize that for myself actually goes back to my childhood memories, where most of us get our first inkling and our first love of Santa Claus. And for me, I was very blessed because I had a very creative family. I grew up in the Midwest, and every Christmas, my entire family would gather at my grandmother's house, who lived in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. It's a little town in the northern part of Wisconsin. And Grandma had a big, huge house and a great, big, huge formal living room. And on Christmas Eve, everybody, siblings, my parents, grandparents, I even had great-grandparents alive at that time. We would all gather together, and as kids, we were all dressed up in our brand new Christmas clothes. My mom would always make little red velvet dresses for us girls with white tights and black patent leather shoes, and the boys had dress shirts and little bow ties, and the adults were dressed up as well. The living room was completely decorated. There was a huge fireplace, always a fire going, and the tree was amazing. It went from the floor all the way up to the ceiling and was completely lit up and decorated. But most importantly of all was a big wingback chair. It was sitting to the left of the tree, and it was empty, just waiting for our guest to show up. And as kids, we knew he was coming, and we would run to the front window, and we'd look out into the dark, and we'd see the newly shoveled path that curved all the way up to the front door. Snow was about 4 feet on each side, perfect for landing a sleigh. And as we look into the darkness, eagerly awaiting, all of a sudden we would hear, and we would run to the window, and we would press our faces against that cold glass, and we'd look, and out of the darkness, here he would come up to the door. We would scramble and fight over who got to open the door for this guy. Usually me, but that's another story. We'd open the door, and here he was, larger than life. Big black galoshes, red suit, big round belly, fur trim, and he had a cloth bag over his shoulder, just brimming full of presents. He would come into the room, and he'd just go, "Merry Christmas! Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas!" And he'd take his place in that chair. He'd set down the bag, and the presents would tumble out of it. Each of us, from the smallest child to the grandparent, had their turn in sitting on Santa's knee. And before we get our first present, we always had to say, not if we'd been good, but how we'd been good. And amazingly, everybody, including my bratty little brother, could come up with a story or two on how wonderful they were all year. So the way that joy filled the room, to me, is Santa Claus and is Christmas. And I still can live that today, and I feel that same sense of joy when I truly give from my heart, or I witness compassion in giving and generosity in another. I have to believe that there does exist at least the possibility of goodwill and cheer to all. There was a little girl in 1887. Her name was Virginia O'Hanlon, and she wrote a letter to the editor of the New York Sun, and she wrote, "Please tell me the truth. Is there a Santa Claus?" Francis P. Church was the editor at that time, and he wrote back, "Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. He exists as certainly as love and generosity and devotion exist. And you know that they abound, and give to your life its highest beauty and joy. Alas, how dreary would the world be if there was no Santa Claus?" So yes, fellow Toastmasters, I do believe in Santa Claus, and I ask you, why not?